Today I have picked up a copy of Drone Zone. It's a new magazine specifically for multirotors in the UK. My local corner shop knew I was into multirotors and got it in for me, and bingo, here it is. This one caught my eye as it's got the X350 Air Dancer on the front. I have reviewed a lot of the XK range recently and I have been impressed with the quality. A few people have requested that I take a look at the X350, so here it is. This is the biggest of the XK range that I have looked at, being a 350 size quadcopter. It's actually been around for a while. It uses 2212 1400 kV brushless motors and a 2200 mAh 3S battery that uses an XT60 connector, so I can easily charge this with my hobby grade charger. I also have an array of 2200 mAh 3S batteries from other quads that will fit into the body, which is good. There also seems to be some extra room to add a bigger battery if you want to. I'm also going to be using a battery voltage beeper so I know when the battery is running out. It fits neatly inside along with the battery. This is called the Air Dancer because that's exactly what it does. It's marketed as a 3D quadcopter where the motors reverse in the air, mimicking the actions of a collective pitch helicopter, just like the X252 and X100 reviewed previously on the channel. I have big expectations of this one, as I have seen other videos when it came out of people successfully flying this like a collective pitch helicopter, performing maneuvers such as tic-tocs and high rate rolls, flips, and inverted flying. I will have a go at that, however my 3D flying isn't the best and my previous 3D experience is all with planes. I have spent the last few years concentrating on FPV instead. Speaking of FPV, this quadcopter comes with a plate that you can attach to the front where you can add an FPV or action cam. This model doesn't come with FPV, but it has been very easy to add. GearBest also sell a specific FPV kit for this quadcopter. However, I'm going to be using the AOMWAY all-in-one FPV cam and VTX combo, which is also sold by GearBest. The quadcopter has some power outlets underneath. The 3-pin connector is a 5V servo outlet with positive, negative and signal pins. The other is a 12V output, with the left pin being the negative and the right pin being the positive. Using individual servo leads, I have plugged these into the AOMWAY camera. It uses a female JST connector which I can plug into the individual pins. There's no soldering needed for this setup, which is great. I have cable tied the camera to the included plate and used cable ties to sort out the wires. The plate screws in underneath via thumb screws. I only have one, unfortunately. When I initially flew it, I didn't tighten it up enough and it fell out in the air. That is my fault. I'm also using a AOMWAY antenna from GearBest, and I plan to fly this FPV using my Fat Shark goggles before I potentially break it trying to fly line of sight in 3D mode. You are given some landing feet in the box. I don't think I will be attaching these as the quad sits on its belly quite nicely. You are given a screwdriver and screws to attach the landing gear. You are also given a spanner to tighten the props. These spinners are the self-tightening style, however you need to use the spanner to do them up tight. The props reverse in 3D mode, rendering the self-tightening spinners redundant. This seems a bit of an oversight to me as well, but you are only given one set of props. Given that this is a 3D quadcopter that will be very susceptible to crashes, I find this surprising, but it's not hard to buy some spares. The props use the DJI keyed holes. The props of course are symmetrical to cater for the 3D flight mode, so I don't expect a huge amount of punch out of these. However, there should be enough power hopefully. As mentioned earlier, you are given a FPV platform plate and thumb screws. The idea is to add an action cam to the front. However, I think if you did that, you will get a fair amount of jello as the plate is long, thin and made of plastic. This is never a good combination for an action cam, especially with a quadcopter using 2212 motors. You of course are given a charger with this package, however I'm going to be charging this battery with my B6AC V2 hobby grade charger. The transmitter is the X7, the same as the X251 and X252 quadcopters. Only this time there's no video record button, so you can't use that servo function underneath the quadcopter with this transmitter. However, the quadcopter also uses the Futaba Fast protocol, so you can use any Futaba Fast capable transmitter with it. There is a bind button in the battery bay of the quadcopter. You just need to plug the quad into the battery and press the button down for 1 second. The lights will flash and the quad will rebind to the transmitter. The transmitter has got hobby grade spring-loaded gimbals. These provide so much more resolution than the Xbox style pots found on toy grade quadcopters. The only downfall again is that the transmitter takes 6 AA batteries, which is quite a lot. As before, you can change the control mode on this transmitter to mode 1 or mode 2. There's 2 handy screw holes on the back, which if turned clockwise lowers a clamp onto the throttle stick, and the other releases the spring-loaded tension, and counterclockwise does the reverse. However, don't unscrew them too much, otherwise the screws will fall inside the transmitter's case and you will have to take the whole thing apart to retrieve them. To change the mode in the software, you need to hold down the mode and back button at the same time. You can then use the circle dial to navigate to the mode switch. Then press enter on the circle dial and move the dial to the left or the right to change into the desired mode. There's only mode 1 and mode 2 offered in the software. One thing you are going to want to do is ensure that the throttle curve is set to 100% for curve 5. To do that, first I need to explain the switches again, as this is a fairly complex setup. The top left hand switch is the idle up switch. If you select this, then zero throttle is at the 50% mark and the motors reverse at this point and below. Above that point, the motors run the normal way. The switch below that is the mode switch. 6G mode is stability mode, where the quadcopter will self-level, and 3D mode is full acro mode. Both idle up and non-idle up switch positions have their own throttle curve, which are enabled when the switches are flipped. So, leaving the switch in the non-idle up mode, we can hold down the menu button and go into the throttle curve using the circle dial and press down on it. Scroll across to curve number 5 and ensure that it is at 100. This will give us the full amount of throttle. Then flick the switch into idle up mode and do the same. On the right hand side we have the rate switch. The up position is low rates and the down position is full rates. Again, I have gone into the menu and changed the dual rate to 125 to give me the highest possible rate. The right shoulder switch is the throttle kill switch. This is important as technically it's your arming switch. Make sure that it is in the off position before powering up the quad, otherwise this can be dangerous. You can see on the transmitter's display whether the throttle is active by looking at the slider. Before I break it, flying in 3D mode, let's go and take it for a flight in FPV. The first thing that you might notice is that I have got the brightness set really high on my FPV goggles. This is because the camera I'm using is a CMOS camera, and when I eventually go into inverted mode, the ground will go darker than when the quad is upright. I have mounted the camera completely level, unlike on a mini quad, because when I'm inverted I want the camera not to face the ground. First of all, I'm going to go into acro mode and see how it flies. It definitely feels pretty locked in. This one is even better tuned than the X252. I went to do a couple of rolls and flips, and from an FPV perspective, the rolls feel pretty slow compared to my mini quad. You have to remember though that a mini quad is purely designed to fly in FPV, where the faster rolls look more impressive. However, the Air Dancer is a line of sight quad, and this roll rate is ample for flying inverted and 3D. Any more than these rates would make it unstable for sure. I learned this from the other XK 3D capable aircraft. One thing that I did notice is that as soon as you apply a lot of throttle, you get a fair amount of vibrations coming through the props that can be heard from the ground. This is due to the inefficiency of the 3D props. I do wonder if I add some normal 8-inch props whether there will be enough power to operate inverted, which might help to reduce the vibrations. I think that this quad is not really designed to be flown in FPV, however I am enjoying it. I felt pretty confident with how I was flying it, so I thought I would have a stab at flying inverted whilst in first person view. My legs started shaking pretty rapidly at this point, but I settled into it pretty well. It's a really strange experience, and for now the best I can do is fly inverted and in a straight line. The moment you start to introduce any rudder which is backwards, it screws my senses up. For a long time now I have been planning on making a 3D capable mini quad. There's a couple of pioneers out there already doing this. Check out Zoe FPV, who seems to have the best results. I'm definitely going to be practicing this some more as it is a ton of fun. The range is quoted as 1,000 meters in the manual. I'm not going to be testing that today. All I require is that it can fly the length of this field up to the trees at the back, which is 120 meters long, and it does that no problem. Now that I've had a chance to fly this in FPV, let's see how I get on flying line of sight. So this is what this quadcopter is really built for, and that is flying it in 3D line of sight. This is the first time that I have actually flown it line of sight, so you can see the green light on the back of the quadcopter there. That means it's in stability mode, and I'm trying to keep it close in. One problem that I had with trying to film this quadcopter is that it is a big quadcopter, but the wide angle lens of the GoPro meant that as soon as it got a little bit away from me, the quadcopter looked quite small. But as you can see, it is a really slick looking quadcopter. This, I really like the look of it. It's really premium as well. So you can see there that the light has gone red, and I'm now in acro mode, and I'm going to proceed to do a couple of rolls and flips in acro mode. This one really works well in acro mode. As I mentioned earlier, it doesn't have the rates of a mini quad, but it's not really required for doing those intense 3D maneuvers. So just as I get used to flying this quadcopter in acro mode, I'm just going to fly it about a bit, and then I'm going to flip into 3D mode and hopefully be able to show off some of this quad's features in 3D. As I mentioned earlier, I'm not the best 3D pilot for quadcopters. I mostly have done my 3D experience with planes, but I'm going to give this a go anyway. So there we go, I flipped into 3D mode, and I have managed to get the quadcopter inverted. It's a really windy day here, but this quadcopter cuts through the wind really well. So I'm trying to get it close to me at the moment. I always used to watch these 3D helicopter pilots at shows where they would sort of cut the grass, and I managed to get it pretty low, so I'm pretty pleased with that. So I'm doing some 3D maneuvers here, I'm putting it inverted, doing some flips, but you can see here, when I'm flying this in person, the quadcopter doesn't look far away from me, but as I'm using my GoPro here, it's getting away from the camera slightly, so I apologize for that as I go for a roll there. Yeah, so the quad is a fair distance away from the camera as I try to do some TikToks. Now this is something that I should talk about. Now I can do TikToks with a helicopter, no problem, but I tend to find that with this quadcopter there is a slight delay between the transition of the props reversing, and it takes some time to get used to that, but it is possible to do TikToks with this. You just have to have kind of like a delayed reaction. I'm not the best at it. I really need to do more practice with this, as I'm going to be doing, because it is really cool. There you go, I have another attempt at some TikToks, but I get quite low down there. So this is another maneuver that I like to do with helicopters, and that is sort of like a 4-point flip. It's really cool. You sort of throttle up and then flip the elevator like in a 4-point roll, and you sort of vary the throttle to get it right. It takes some practice, and I need to do more practice of that. So I'm just doing some more flips there, just getting used to it. And trying not to crash. We got another roll there. And I'm really enjoying flying this. It is really locked in. Definitely the most locked in, as mentioned before, compared to the X251 and X252 in the X100. I really like this one. So I've gone back into acro mode there. I think that's all my nerves can take when it comes to the 3D mode. And you can hear there my beeper is starting to go off, which means it's going to be time to land. But there you go, that is my review of the XK X350. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks to GearBest for sending this in for review. You can follow me on Instagram at AndyRC_channel for more content. As always, please continue to subscribe. Cheers.